everybody. Welcome. All right.
No.
Um, Thank you very much. I'm excited to talk to you today. The topic that we have is around total customer experience, and it's really about that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. What is overall customer experience? What is total customer experience? But I don't think you can really answer that question without thinking about how do you drive to the right outcomes. Because at the end of the day, whether you're putting together something that's digital or not, you have to drive to positive outcomes for you and for your customers. So that's the topic today. And without I'll let John give some intros from the TransTech side, and then we'll get
Yeah,
going.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, one of the things that we'll talk about today, what we'll gain from this conversation, are what are business leaders doing to create a lifetime of customers. We feel that's very important. And what really makes these things useful for everyone on is to be interactive. So if you want to hold your questions until the end, that's fine. If you want to ask questions during the chat, Mike could chime in. But again, it's about sharing ideas. So my name is John Rabito. I've been with TransTech IT Staffing for 8 years now. I've been in the industry for 26 years. My goal is to help organizations and individuals find jobs that are beneficial to both sides. So my contact information is actually on the next slide. If you're looking for 15 minutes of advice on how we can help you fill your positions, or if you're a candidate looking for a job in the marketplace, please feel free to reach out to me. There's my Twitter account, and then my email will be at the end of the presentation. So any questions that I could help, whether you're looking for help filling positions or looking for your next career goal, it's something I could definitely help you out with. So at this point, MQ, let's move forward and let's jump in.
All right, sounds good. So, I started everything off, talking a lot about experience. And this is a quote that I think really defines my thoughts on it. It's from Samuel Johnson, the guy who created the dictionary. And it says, men are wise in proportion, not to their experience, but to their capacity for experience. And so I think, when we're thinking about customer experience and what the total customer experience means, that has a lot to do with it. Quick intro on me. This is my family, pre-COVID, and I've been in digital for over 20 years. Have had just I'm blessed to have a very fun set of experiences so far. I've lived in a lot of different countries. I've worked for companies like GM and Razorfish, Grainger, and McDonald's. Founded a startup, and I'm the dad of two extraordinary children. Just to talk about TransTech for a second. One of the big drivers for doing this is connecting with TransTech again. When I first moved to Chicago almost 15 years ago, the wonderful folks at TransTech placed me at Kraft Foods for a year. And it was, a very good experience, and we've been in touch off and on since. But one, among, all things digital and all things I'm passionate about, I'm also very passionate about cooking. And so today, what I'm going to aim to do is give you a cooking lesson. What does that really mean? So, I'm going to talk to you about what it takes to put together a great meal, and what that potentially teaches us about creating a great digital experience. And at the end, I'm going to give you at least my recipe for the perfect steak. And hopefully all of this will come together, and we'll be able to enjoy our time. So with that being said, what is a great meal experience, and how does that translate to a great digital experience? By the way, just to let you know, none of the stuff here is stock photography. These are meals that I've made. And if you're ever in Northbrook, feel free to drop by anytime. So what does it take, to create, either of those things? Well, number one, you have to think about context, right? When you're jumping into creating things, understanding context is very important. And so there's a lovely quote that I came across from somebody called Alex Nuska on ZDNet. And it says, context dictates the scale of people's need. And so, when we think about that, what does that mean? People's product experiences depend deeply on the context in which they're used. So, whether you're serving a meal or you're building, let's say, for example, in this example, we'll use a mobile app to drive. You can replace this with AI, machine learning, blockchain, whatever it is that, is that new thought. But we'll take mobile app for now because we can relate to a lot of it. Ultimately, you have to think about what's the context. Why is this being done? When you're serving a meal, that's the context that you're driving towards. But you have to think about, again, what is that context? Why is this being done? Is this a meal for your family, a dinner party for 3 or 4 friends, or 20 people with kids? Is there a business element to this get together? Similarly, when you're building a mobile app, you have to ask those questions yourself. Is this an app for all of your users? Is there a clear need for native app usage? Can this be done through other channels, through mobile web or something else? Is there an existing native app? And again, what is the context of use? Ultimately, what you're doing is thinking about who, what, and when. But more importantly, when you're thinking about that, you really have to think about why. Because again, we're thinking about driving to the correct outcome, not just an outcome. So how do you get to that? There's two techniques that I like to use when we're thinking about how do we get to the right context. The first is a tool called context of use. And I'll take Google Maps as an example here. So with Google Maps, they use context of use in their product iteration, product development process to really come to and prioritize the right features. So in one particular case, if you look at each of these things by themselves, right? Say you cover up one and you say, okay, well, what if your phone has low battery and you're using Google Maps to get directions, right? You're trying to navigate your way around. What's priority or feature that you can, prioritize, in that particular, context? So, maybe it's the ability to download the app or create a quick snapshot of it that you can refer to. What if data roaming is an issue? You're in an area where you don't have, you're in another part of the world, or, connecting the data is really important. Maybe that's something that you can refer to, a little bit later, or you're just in a place with poor signal. Now, if you take each and every one of these by themselves, you'll prioritize a certain type of feature. But what if you have all three going on at the same time? How does that dictate your context of use? And when you think through those scenarios, it gives you very different use cases for where Google Maps is important, what features are important, and getting those things right and thinking through those scenarios helps you prioritize the right things. Another way of getting to the right context is called the 5 Whys. The 5 Whys was it's part of a larger set of disciplines that's used at Toyota. Toyota uses something called the A3 process, which is basically A3 size sheet of paper where you can put down what your problem is that you're experiencing and basically think about why that problem exists. What's the measure, what's the possible solutions? What are the measures for success and how to repeat it? But when you start thinking about when you write down your problem in an A3, you're supposed to use a pencil because that's oftentimes just the symptom. And so one of the founders of Toyota came up with the 5 Whys. So you can get down and go underneath, but it's sometimes some people say only 3 Whys, sometimes people say 5, but it's basically so that you can get to the right problem. So the surface level problem is I ran a red light, right? I got a ticket. Well, why, now you can look at it from that perspective and say, well, don't speed or don't run red lights. Well, is that the real problem? No, well, why do you run a red light? Well, I was late for work. Why are you late for work? Well, I woke up late. Why did you wake up late? I didn't have an alarm. Why didn't you have an alarm? Well, I didn't check. Well, why didn't you check? Well, it's because I really forgot to set the alarm. So my ultimate outcome was I ran a red light, but the real reason was that I didn't set my alarm. So, when you start doing that, you get to an idea of, what's that right context, and that helps you get to the right why when you are starting the beginning of your journey. Now, the second part is about knowing your audience. Now we've identified, okay, why are we doing something? What are the reasons behind it? what, who am I building this for? So Christina Newberry at Hootsuite writes, your target audience is not everyone. Your task is in defining your target group to identify and understand your particular niche so you can dominate it. So let's dig into this, right? Um, when you're looking to serve a meal that everyone attending will enjoy, that's the outcome that you're driving to. You need to think about, who are my guests? Are these old friends, new friends? Are they not friends at all? It's people you're meeting for the first time. Do they have any food allergies? Do they drink? Are they vegan or vegetarian? Do they only eat halal or kosher? Right? These will extraordinarily change what you're doing. Similarly, when you think about that product feature that you're developing, what do you know about the individuals? What share of wallet or usage is driven by which segments of my user base? Right? Are they primarily female? Are they primarily male? Are they between a certain demographic? Are they current or future users? Do they use my competitors' products? What behaviors do they engage in? These are the things that you need to know about your audience so that you can create a feature or a function or a product that'll actually be used. So a lot of times you've heard this statement called fail fast, right? Because why do they say fail fast? Because you don't want to go through a 2-year cycle of product development only to find out that your product doesn't hit traction because you didn't take the time to understand it in the beginning. So understanding individuals is very important. Now, there's ways in which you do this, which you can create user personas, right? And say, this is what my customers look like, what their demographic is, where they live, what their income levels are, et cetera. So you get a picture of who this human individual is. Now, when I was in my startup days with Zubies, we actually, we created a platform for creating local experiences, local guides on demand that can provide experiences to travelers. And we started with personas, but what we realized is that beyond personas, what we're really interested in is behavioral archetypes. So it's not so, you can be of a certain age, a certain demographic, a certain income level, and from a certain geography, but does that really dictate how you behave? Not really, right? It can give you some idea, but not a lot. And so we came up with these 3 individual customer archetypes that we based on many tests that we did out in the marketplace. So we came up with a comfort seeker, right? This is a person who's, I'm happy to pay more for something that brings me joy, right? So we can create a set of what we call premium experiences for this individual. We came across the individualist. My time is precious and I want to invest in the things that are to my exact interest. They're driven by a desire to stand apart from others and feel special. And then third was the tribal aficionado. Every small detail is something that helps me understand more of what I love. These are people that are driven by special interests that guide planning, holidays, and experiences, etc. So for these, they're how-to experiences. And from there, we were able to come up with experiences that really went across the gamut, not just from a category perspective. 3 categories we had: food and wine, art and architecture, active and lifestyle. But what's the set of experiences around these categories that'll hit the premium, the bespoke, and the how-to? So this is an example of how you can potentially bring what you're moving forward to life when you think about behavioral archetypes. So now you've thought about, in the beginning, why we're doing something. We've identified who we're doing it for. Now the third question is, what are we making, right? Oftentimes when you come into what are we making, sometimes it's defined at the beginning. Someone defines it for you. An executive says, we need a mobile app. We need to do something in AI. We need to do something in blockchain. But at the end of the day, we have to think about, well, is this something that is actually necessary for what we're going to do? So when we're thinking about this, we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for? What are we making? And really think about, what's that problem that we're solving, right? What's the cost to realize that problem? And how much risk are we taking on? So that leads to the set of decisions that you make, right? Now, when you think about it, you've got basic build versus buy questions, right? When you think about build, right, what are we making? Well, we can build this ourselves. That's, a lot of those questions being asked will help define that. The pros of building something is, I can customize it to exactly what I want. I can control the quality, and there's a proprietary factor to it. The buy side could be, Well, I can do it quickly. I can get it close versus being perfect, and I can repeat it a lot more, and that'll therefore lower my risk. So, taking the food analogy again, when you're building, I can customize the flavor. I can make it perfect. I can take all the credit for making this delicious meal. Or when I buy, hey, I know exactly when Grubhub will deliver. It's close enough to satisfy a bunch of different meal choices. And, oh, you like this? Let's order something else. So you don't like it, let's order something else. So no one size fits all, but you need to really understand some of these things before you get to the decision of what you're making. The next part is now, we've identified, what's the context, who are we doing it for, what are we going to make? Now we have to think about what's that actual plan to succeed. So this is where a lot of times we tend to fail. And the reason is because we can have fantastic ideas, but as we all know, it all lies in execution. So when you start thinking about how you're going to execute, what's that plan that you have to succeed? What's the kickoff? Do you have the right people involved? What are all the readiness factors, right? Do you have all the tools, the resources that you need, right? What's the engagement and activity? How many people do you need to engage inside and outside of your organization to get this done? And then how are you going to take the learnings and actually spread them out and learn from them and get them into a space where you can iterate? So, and that helps you plan. The second part is around measurement, right? So now that you've gotten that plan together, you've identified, okay, we can do this, we can kick it off next quarter, we have the right readiness, we have the right people engaged, we know how we're going to take in our feedback. Now, how do you plan to succeed? You do it by measurement, right? So what are those KPIs that are really going to help drive what you're doing? Is it going to be about task completion and team delivery? Are you going to do retros? Is this being done on a week-to-week basis? Is it being done after everything is put together? These are all the measurement tools that you have to identify in place so that you can plan to succeed. And then finally, you have to actually follow through. So do you have the correct project plan? Right. So, a lot of times, when folks are, we're in an agile world, right? We're in an agile environment. We don't need project plans. We're just going to build the stories and just burn them down, right? And if you're a mature organization with agile, absolutely. But what I found a lot of times is that there's kind of a mix in between. Ultimately, I believe personally in that you need to have the correct project plan, but you also need to make sure that it's deep enough but light enough so that it's not inundating the people that need to do the work. But what it does do is that ultimately it needs to give you the insight to adjust levers in terms of capacity and resources so that you can get things done when there's need to get done, and they can engage the resources and capture the data that you need in order to keep things moving. So at this point, I would be a little curious as to, and if anybody's interested, would love to ask you, what are your thoughts in terms of planning, in terms of being able to follow through, and where do you engage your resources in that, in the plan, and really in any of the other things that I just talked about?
So let me ask this, MQ. If you had to boil down what the customer journey would be in one sentence, what would it be?
It would be get me what I need with as little friction and as much delight as possible.
Okay. not creating that friction is always, you have to be sensitive to that in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, you have your customers, whether you have a map or not, your customers are engaging in a journey with you, right? They are discovering you, they are interacting with you through multiple channels. It's not in a neat swim lane PowerPoint, right? They're only going to connect with you through digital, or only through offline, or only through other means. They're going to interact with you in multiple ways. And so you need to be able to map those things out and at least get a sense of, who in front of the house, behind the house interacts with, you to support all of that. And so when you're introducing something new, you have to think about where you will add or remove friction. So one of the easiest qualifying questions that I have when we're thinking about, new ideas is, where does it fit, and does it create friction or reduce friction? And sometimes new things will create friction. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but ultimately you should be ready for that friction. So now when we're thinking about ways to reduce friction, one of the things is presentation, right? When you figured out what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're doing it for, you planned, now you actually need to execute. You put together that execution, but you need to make it beautiful. So, on the left, is some beautiful New York strip steak. On the right is a wonderful app, around stuff for your new baby. And so what are the things that are in common? These things have to have appeal, right? When you interact with something, your goal should be is that it makes me want it. Now you can look at that and say, well, this is only applicable to B2C. Not really, right? People are still consumers at the end of the day, whether they're interacting with a B2B system or a B2C system. They need to think about function. They need to think about, have a pleasant experience while they're interacting with it. So no matter how you're communicating, you need to be able to think, okay, I want this, I want to interact with it. Another part is building intrigue, right? It looks gorgeous, but it also makes me want to explore this a little bit more. What is underneath here? Are each of these elements, if you're looking on the right, is a teddy bear clickable? Is there something that I can do on here? And that's where the micro interactions come out. So what are those little details that exist? Those micro interactions that help drive more intrigue and more engagement with what you're putting together. And then finally, it needs to be personal, as in it needs to feel like this is made for me. So how do you do that? You can execute it in various ways. But again, when you think about, now I've taken the time to understand what we're doing, I've taken the time to understand who my users are. By that time, you're taking all this information, and that leads you to get the data that you need to be able to make it appealing, look gorgeous, create good details, and also feel very personal to the person, to the individual that's interacting with it. Now, you put all that together, but at the end of the day, people still need to know what you're doing. Awareness is a really big thing. And so at the end of it, it's what I say, the sizzle that sells the steak, right? So by itself, the picture of a beautiful piece of carne asada looks great, but when you have a little video that squeezes that lime over it, it makes you just want to interact with it a little bit more. And so this is where social media and awareness become really important. It's not just about doing it, it's about who else knows it was done. So when you are putting this together, this is not just only for the outside world. This could be internal as well, because sometimes you're building things and no one else in the company even knows that you're building something. So you have to think about awareness from within your organization and outside of your organization. So document your process, make it simple, record what you're doing, share it, right? Be fearless. Think about all those different channels that exist and you can get feedback from. As you've seen from the huge rise of TikTok, in the last couple of years, this is applicable across in many different ways. And whether your business is B2B or B2C, you can really leverage this to be able to engage your users and connect people with people who are your existing customers and could potentially be your future customers. But you have to build it, you have to share it and share it often. And that's really where the repeat piece comes in. You have to know what your voice is, and you have to be consistent with your voice and share it often so that people can get a sense of comfort with you, and they need to feel like they know you. They know what your company is, what your values are, and that gets repeated in every post that you put together. A good example, of some of this is and knowing your voice. I'm going to give 3 examples of authenticity, in those voices. So, check out these channels. These are some of my favorite channels when it comes to food. Sorted is, their voice is 4 blokes in London who like to get together, and they're best pals. They like to cook together, and that's really where their channel was born. Food Wishes, this guy is a master chef, but his persona is of an awesome uncle who's just cooking in his kitchen, and you're just hanging out with him. and he's got over 5 million subscribers. Fit Men Cook is all about healthy living and people creating things that are delicious but are healthy for you as well. Again, these people know their voices, and everything that they're doing is very authentic to what that voice is. So again, whether you're B2C or B2B, you need to know that authenticity and make sure it comes through. So, to summarize everything that we've talked about, you need to start with knowing the context. Think about who your audience is and what you're building for. Get to a decision point so you can commit to a clear outcome, and then plan, execute, measure, and more importantly, learn from what feedback you're getting. Make it beautiful, easy, intuitive, engaging, and then ensure that everybody knows. Create the sizzle for everything that you're putting out there internally and externally. So with that, I'm going to pause for a sec before I go into my recipe here. But any questions so far? I've been talking. I know if you want to hold them to the end, that's fantastic. But any thoughts about where potentially product management or customer experience is positioned in all of this, or anything that's on top of your mind that you'd like me to answer before we move forward?
So where do you think that, let me ask, where do you think that typically business leaders fail? Is it more at the plan stage or the measure stage?
Yeah, I think what happens is that it's a couple of places. So one, I think it's very easy to get enamored with the beauty and the sizzle and imagine all of that without doing the pre-work. So I think I think where business leaders fail is that desire to get to the outcome immediately without the runway to get all the right information to make decisions. So so the decision is made without the commitment to a clear outcome because the context and the audience hasn't been identified. So ultimately, I think it starts with the why. I think the failure comes with not understanding what is the real reason that we're doing this. Why does it make sense for us? We want to do a mobile app. Fantastic. Are customers ready for it? Does it make sense for our business? Are we going to enter a category where it makes sense? We want to get into AI and machine learning. That's fantastic. Again, how is it really going to help our customers? Is it going to let us sell? Is it going to move us forward in any particular way? So I'd say if there's any one thing, I would say knowing the why is probably the most important. And that's why I started with it.
Okay. Also, I wanted to ask, if you were overhauling your customer journey, what do you think the ideal timeline is from conception to actually the place where you could measure if it was a failure or a success? What do you think that timeline would be?
Yeah, so that's a really good question because it really depends on the complexity and the amount of fidelity that goes into. So if you're overhauling it, I would say that if you want to do it deep and do it right, I would say that it should be no less than 4 to 6 weeks of really heavy work, to go in and redo it. And this requires commitment from a lot of different folks because, again, think about, you're mapping everything from awareness to interaction to action, fulfillment, support, right? Those are the key areas. You'll need representation from all of those areas and real intelligence. You'll need a lot of data to understand what your customers are doing today. You'll need marketing, merchandising, technology to understand, where it all fits in. And then you'll get to your tech stack and then your measurement points, etc. Now, if you're going to do that right, then I think that it takes time to build that and iterate it. And then once you're done, it should not be something that just gets done and then it's a beautiful, pretty picture that lays around. What's really important is that this stays living, that you continuously add to it, that you refer to it, and let it be, and let new information change the data that's there, because it needs to be accurate for it to be useful. Now, that being said, I have gotten people together and done this in 2 days, right? You can do a hackathon, and as long as you have some, enough knowledgeable people in those various areas there, you can sit down and just start to put it together and map it out, and put it together quickly. But then it needs to be, constantly refined, and more detail needs to be added to it.
Okay. If you're talking about like marketing and business development, who do you think are the internal champs that would help drive the change to technology?
Yeah, so sales, business development really is a big piece, for intelligence. Product managers can't afford to sit behind a desk. They need to get out into the field. They need to ride along with salespeople. They need to, if you're in a B2C area, get closest to where the revenue is generated, where the sales actually occur. What are those individual transactions that drive? So if you have an organization that has a retail footprint, get into the store, get behind the counter, see how people interact. If you are in a B2B environment, who are your buyers? Go out and meet with them. It'll change your perspective dramatically when you're sitting and hearing directly from someone versus hearing it secondhand from salespeople. So certainly I would say get very close to them. Also, these guys get hit up with ideas and requests all the time. This can be your channel for innovation. So think about your voice of customer, not just as a way to solve break fixes, but as a way to mine information for innovation ideas. So then you can see whether they need to be incubated or accelerated, and it can really lead into developing your product roadmap in a much more rich manner. Marketing, this is where you're partnering up not only from the awareness standpoint, but also from the standpoint of just data that's coming in. Who are our again, who's the audience, right? Who are you building for? You need to partner up with marketing to really understand who we're all building for. What's that true north that the company identifies? You can't go off and be too different from everybody else. If the company's marketing to this type of folks, unless that there is a specific move to start to market to another segment, you need to be aligned with that so that your voice is one and the same.
I sometimes feel like there's a disconnect between those departments. How do you bridge that?
Yeah, I think it's just people don't talk enough. I think what it is that I'm doing this and you're doing that, and that's what you're doing, right? And we're parallel. We're walking the same path. We're not intersecting at any point, right? So there's two ways. One is from just getting out and engaging, right? So I was saying you can't sit behind the desk. You need to go out and approach and build partnerships with those folks and invite them in. The second way is that I like to set up showcases of everything that we're doing and invite the company to see what we're doing, right? Put it out there and say, hey, today we're going to be talking about this thought leadership, or we have this new little concept that we built out that we'd like to share. This then gets people in the mode of being able to come in and look at what you're doing and providing you that feedback. When you invite them into your process, into your world, and you really take the time to understand the problems that they face and how you can help, that helps then build up and build those partnerships a lot more effectively, I think, than when you're just focused on your individual narrow tasks.
Okay, wonderful.
All righty, so great. So I think we're ready for my perfect steak. So it's the tandoori spiced New York strip. It's about 4 steps, takes about 20 minutes. So what's the first thing? Source well, right? Think about, you're only as good as your ingredients. So if you're gonna, go out and make a beautiful, piece of steak, then I would say try and get something as good as you can get. This is, what's pictured as a Wagyu that, I don't know, is that accessible or available to everybody? But, I definitely think the quality in produce is most of the battle. Now, that being said, this is true about people as well. You need to source well and find the right people. And this is where, partners like TransTech, I think, come in, very, very well. And that, really partnering with individuals who are looking for talent, and partnering with seasoned individuals like the folks at TransTech really helps you source the right people, because that is half the battle. If you're thinking about the problem that you're solving and you're trying to get the right folks there, when they're in place, that really helps you move forward in the right manner right from day one. So always be on lookout for the best, and leverage folks like John and Mike and the team here to do so. Um, the next part is about seasoning, right? So season beautifully. In my particular case, for my tandoori spice New York strip, I add garam masala, turmeric, cumin, chili powder, garlic powder, salt and pepper, and I massage it into the steak, with some oil. Now, again, this is true for people, right? When you've got the right team in place, are you giving them the right ingredients? Are you giving them the right tools? Are you giving them the right data, the information? Are you pointing them in the right direction, right? This is, as a leader, you have to think about seasoning your team and making sure that they have everything that they need to really bring out their best flavor. Now, the next part is fire adequately. So what does that mean? That means that I like to get the grill very hot, like between 500 and 600 degrees. About an inch and a half steak, I like to do 7 minutes per side. And you need to give it that little bit of time so that the crust on your steak can form. Otherwise, when you try and take it off, it rips. Now, how is that true for people? Once you've sourced the right people, you've given them the right data, you've given them the right direction, you've helped them understand what their role is in the vision that you have, then you need to stand aside and let them do their thing, right? You can't micromanage. You can't consistently flip that steak every 30 seconds. You can't micromanage your team. You need to trust them and give them the ability to be able to execute on the vision, and let them make mistakes. That's okay. That's part of learning. Some of those mistakes lead to actually serendipitous moments that you can then take. And the only time you really fail is when you fail to learn. So this is why when you're measuring, you really need to make that plan to take those learnings and to learn from them and bring them into your iteration cycle. And then finally, once your steak has been adequately fired and it's ready to come off the grill, you need to let it rest. So you need to let it rest for at least 10 minutes. And what happens here is that it releases its juices and it reabsorbs them. Now, that's, again, important for people as well. Your teams are going to work hard for you. They're going to work hard in solving things that you haven't even identified yet or understood. You've given them everything that they need. But when they work hard, they also need, they also can't be moving at 150% all the time. You need to give them time to relax. You need to give them time to absorb what they've learned. Again, this is where the learning process becomes very important. So you need to actively take that feedback, think about how it applies to the customer journey, think about how it applies to what you're building on a day-to-day basis. Give them that rest time to be able to think of and be creative. And that rest and relaxation is very important with those final results. And then at the end of the day, slice it up, serve it, enjoy it, and have a wonderful meal, and I hope a great digital experience.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful. So I do have one more question for you. With all the technologies that are available and all the all the channels that are available, how do you direct your time and your resources to figure out what's the best way to have customers find you?
Sure.
There's so many different options today.
Yeah. Again, this really, comes down to your voice, right? Knowing who you are. So, in that particular, standpoint, right? When you think about who you're working for and who you are, it makes the channels clear. Now, you're right. There's a lot of different ways for people to discover who you are. Like if you're in the staffing business or in professional business, a lot of people look at LinkedIn. I don't think there's really any other person that competes. But when you're thinking about forums like TikTok, et cetera, these are things that you can't ignore, and you need to think about how you can engage with them. But ultimately, I think it comes down to authenticity, right? And is that authentic for you, who you are and who your customer is? The TikTok might be a great way to reach a lot of people. Is it going to resonate with the people that are ultimately going to buy what you have to sell, right? So, are you going to find your buyers there, right? Reddit is another, interesting example, right? A lot of, people, it's known as the front page of the internet, and there's lots of different niches that are inside Reddit, right? Some of it is around, and it's a great way to develop, I think, get good, honest answers from a wide group of people, back. Ultimately, I think, again, it depends on who you are and who you're working for. You can't ignore some of the big social media networks that are out there, but how you present yourself really makes a big difference because, again, is it authentic to what you're doing?
Wonderful. Well, we certainly thank you for your time today. Again, anyone who wants to reach out to MQ directly, his information is on, I think, 2 slides up. Anyone's there we go. If anyone's looking for any analysis on what's going on with the job market right now, I'm more than happy to help, more than able to share data with you on what we're seeing with other clients. And I'll tell you what, I think next summer we're going to host this at the office, and maybe you could cook for all of us.
Hey, anytime.
Well, again, MQ, thank you very much. A lot of great information today. We certainly appreciate it. And we will be posting this on our YouTube channel for everybody to see. So thank you very much again, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.